Hey guys, Rago here, and today we're going to be reviewing the 2019 Cabrinha Switchblade. The Cabrinha Switchblade has been around for well over a decade now, and this is the kite that we use to judge all others. Why? Well, aside from the fact that it's one of the most popular models we've ever carried, it's the right kite for most kiteboarders, new or experienced. And in 2019, aside from small internal changes to the build and the sprint system, the Switchblade remains largely unchanged this year. After all of those years of refinement, there's really not much more that can be done to the kite. And rather than try to fix something that's not broken, Cabrinha is releasing a new kite, the Motel. We'll be releasing a complete review in comparison of these two kites along with this video. So if you click the eye icon in the upper right hand corner of your screen, you'll open up our blog in a new tab where you can watch and read the comparison video after this video. So typically with our overview videos, we usually talk about what's new and what you can expect from the newer model this year. And with nothing having really changed this year, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to give an in-depth review on this kite and where it stands today. So of all the kites that we carry, the Switchblade is most renowned for its jumping abilities, its ease of use, its upwind ability, and the fact that it really does everything quite well. And because it sits right in the middle of pretty much everything, it's kind of become the barometer when testing all of our other kites. I like to look back and compare them to the Switchblade. Why? Because it sits right in the middle on just about everything, and you'll likely never outgrow its capabilities. So what does that mean? Well, like we've said in many videos, it does every discipline of kiteboarding quite well, but the other niche kites will outperform in that specific discipline. So considering few kiteboarders are married to one style of riding, the Switchblade is often the best choice. Whether you're a free rider, a big air rider, a freestyler, a wave rider, or a wake styler, even a foil boarder, the Switchblade really is that jack of all trades, and the Switchblade's versatility is why it stood the test of time. So let's start with the wind range. Now the Switchblade really does have one of the largest wind ranges that we've ever seen in a kite, meaning that you can take the same size out in more wind in less wind than many other kites. And this is very advantageous whether you're a new rider or you're somebody who's practicing tricks and you need to just get back upwind like that. The kite sits very far forward in the wind window and just has a very strong upwind drive. And there are really only a handful of kites out there on par with the upwind drive, and even less that surpass it, but those kites usually make trade-offs for that specific trait. And while the Switchblade does have an incredible upwind drive and a massive wind range, the only trade-off here is that it is not the fastest kite, and it does have moderate bar pressure. And something that comes into play with the low end of this kite is it has a very grunty feel in the bar. We've always found it to be a good thing when teaching lessons and getting students on the kite. They really can feel where that kite is. The kite makes up for their lack of ability, but for some riders, they may not care for the moderate bar pressure, and they might want to look to a kite like the new Moto, for example, which actually doesn't quite have the same wind range, but has a lighter feel and is fairly on par with the Switchblade. So let's talk about jumping. Now the Switchblade is an incredible kite for jumping in the sense that it really takes no rider feedback. It's very easy and it's very much a pull and go kite. So all you have to do is get a bit of board speed, edge, and then pull that bar in and send it, and you're going to go up. As opposed to a kite like the FX that might take a bit more timing in exchange for a very high performance. So the idea here with the Switchblade is to make a kite that not only jumps very high, but is very easy to jump with. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. And a common mistake that people sometimes make with the Switchblade is because it's such a beginner-friendly kite, that they might perceive the kite as a beginner kite, but this is not the case at all. The Switchblade is very much a kite that advanced riders will often choose simply because they can get tons of height and tons of loft. The only real downside to jumping with the Switchblade isn't really a downside, it's just more so an inherent trait to how the kite is designed, and that is that it does have a bit of a delayed feel in the sense that it's not as responsive to rider input, which is a great thing for riders who lack skill, simply because the kite's doing most of the work. You simply pull the bar and the kite's going to take you up. And some people who prefer to ride sea kites or freestyle kites or other kites that are a bit more responsive and take more timing, they might find the Switchblade to be a bit delayed. But for the average rider who is not riding a kite like that, you're going to want to be on the Switchblade because it is the easiest kite to get big air with. So when it comes to jumping, for the vast majority of kiteboarders out there, Switchblade really is the right choice because you can focus on the trick that you're doing, your next progression. You're not worrying about the kite's doing the work. But for those riders that might be looking for a more stick shift type feel, they might want to ride a kite like the FX where they have more control over if it's an aggressive jump, if it's a smooth jump, and the kite's going to respond just a bit more to their feedback. So let's talk about bar pressure and feel. Now, on the original iterations of the Switchblade, the kite was characterized by heavy bar pressure and a very slow and delayed field. And this progressively changed over the years. And somewhere around, 2011, the kite started getting lighter and faster. In 2013, they actually redesigned it. People hated it, and they switched back in 2014. And then since the 2014 generation, the kite has just gotten quite a bit lighter. And a common thing that you'll hear now in the industry is kites don't change that much. And that's actually true. Kites don't change that much year to year. But if you were to fly a 2012 Switchblade versus a 2015 Switchblade, you're going to notice a big difference. And likewise, if you fly the 2015 compared to the latest iteration, you're going to notice some differences in the way that it feels, the way that it flies, how it responds in the sky. So it's more so incremental improvements over the years, albeit the last 2 years are in fact unchanged. So what can you expect from the 2018 or 2019 Switchblade in regards to bar pressure and feel? Well, it's a moderate bar pressure kite. It is a reasonably fast kite. It's not the fastest kite out there, but this isn't a bad thing. This is actually something that's incredibly beneficial for newer riders. But if you're that rider that just wants to focus on the trick you're working on, or you're a newer rider who wants a kite that's going to do most of the work for you, the Switchblade will likely be the right choice in terms of feel and bar pressure for you. So let's talk about stability. If you know anything about kites, you know that 5-stroke kites are often the most stable, and this is very true with the Switchblade. So I often like to think of it as the perfect kite for imperfect conditions. And what I mean is when we're going out in more turbulent or gusty winds or things are just kind of sketchy, the Switchblade really does compensate for that. And again, this comes back to that autopilot feel, but it's a very, very stable kite in the sense that even when the wind is up and down, the kite, it doesn't flutter too much. It's not going to whip around on you so long as you're flying it within its respective wind range. Something that I've always loved about the Switchblade is when you are flying it in turbulent or gusty wind, there's very much a shock absorbent feel to the control bar, so it's not going to jerk your harness around. It's just a very comfortable kite to fly in what would normally be pretty uncomfortable conditions. And the only real drawback to the 5 struts is it does make the Switchblade a bit heavier in contrast to some of the other kites in their lineup that are 3 struts and lighter weight. So what about kite loops? Now obviously when the FX came out, people went crazy over that kite because it was designed for kite loops, it was very aggressive, very powerful, and the Switchblade kind of took a back seat. Almost to the point where some people were surprised to realize that you could still do kite loops with the Switchblade. But that's actually pretty silly because the Switchblade is a great performer for kite loops. And I think Nick Jacobson is very much a testament to that. He's been riding that kite for the last year now, and the dude's a complete savage when it comes to kite loops. And while it's not as powerful or aggressive as the FX when it comes to kite loops, the Switchblade is a great tool for the job. And for most riders who are just looking to do smooth, stylish tricks that are incorporating kite loops, whether that's into transitions, back loops, down loops, whatever it is, it's still a great contender. And actually our team rider Blake Olson went from the FX to the Switchblade this year, and this is the year that he's really been progressing on his kite loops, and we just did a tutorial on them, and he's loving his Switchblade right now for kite loops. So to that end, don't be mistaken, the Switchblade is a great contender for kite loops. It's just a bit different and less aggressive than a kite like the FX. So let's talk about the Switchblade and the surf. Now, obviously we can take the Switchblade into the waves. It's not going to be as well-rounded as, say, a drifter, but it's certainly going to get the job done. And the biggest thing to consider with the Switchblade, the one characteristic that makes the kite incredibly easy to use, is it just has so much low end and so much grunt and all that upward performance that it's a very powerful kite when you're on the waves. And a little trick here that a lot of advanced riders have done the last few years is when you're going into the waves on a Switchblade, you can actually size down, a meter or two to compensate for that power, and then what you're going to have is not only a faster kite, but a kite that doesn't have the same grunt. So to that end, the Switchblade is an incredibly fun kite in the waves, and I would love to hear your feedback on this. If you're a wave rider who has been using the Switchblade and maybe you are riding a size down, or maybe you just have some other tips or tricks to contribute to the conversation, chime in the comments and just let us know what you do to optimize the kite for the waves. Another interesting point that I want to just touch on lightly here is unhooking and wake style. Now with the Switchblade, obviously compared to the FX is the better choice in this particular category, but the Switchblade is still a great contender. It doesn't have the same explosive pop or slack that the FX may offer, but it does have a very good pop and it certainly gets the job done. It just takes a little bit more strength to pull that bar into your hip if you're doing handle passes or anything of that nature. And actually, kind of a funny note, when I first learned to kiteboard many years ago, they used to promote the Switchblade as a wake style kite. So it certainly gets the job done. It's just a bit different than the FX. And when it comes to progression on the Switchblade, the sky really is the limit. It just doesn't have that same slack ability that the FX has. But beyond that, it's still a great contender. So if you're that rider who's looking to do a little bit of everything, you really can progress in the Switchblade. But if unhooking is the only thing you're interested in, then yeah, you might want to look at the FX. So in summary, the Switchblade is just an incredibly user-friendly jack of all trades. It's a kite that's got an autopilot-like feel. It does most of the work for you. It really does all the disciplines on a fairly high level, particularly the big air. For most kiteboarders, it really is the right choice. And then the only downside is I think that it's been around so long, maybe people are getting a little bit bored, they're looking for something different. And then for those riders that don't want that automatic autopilot type feel, then this may not be the right kite for you. But for most people, the Switchblade still really is the king of kites. So if you are that newer rider who wants something that's going to make your life very easy, or you're that advanced rider that simply wants to focus on the trick that you're working on and you don't want to worry about controlling the kite, then the Switchblade is still a great contender for you. So hey guys, I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. And until next week, this has been Rygo, and I will see you next time.